Flip, hey.
Spider-Man Far From Home broke me.
How you doing?
13 Reasons Why Spider-Man Homecoming is not a good Spider-Man movie.
I hope you're doing well. I just watched Spider-Man Far From Home, and I feel sick. As you know, I've spent a lot of my time giving up a lot of dignity talking about the MCU Spider-Man. My video on Homecoming somehow became my most notable YouTube work, a video I made when I was like 18 that contains footage of me pulling a Spider-Man toy out of my ass. That video will be my legacy. And listen, man, I never intended for this to happen. I never intended for any of this. One cannot control their own microscopic impact or the misguided rift it seemed to have caused among us terminally online Spidey fans. The way people talk, you would think I said MCU Spider-Man strung me up by a web noose. Tom Holland personally kicked my ass outside an Arby's. Tom, I'm sorry. Far From Home didn't break. And John Watts burned the Stark Industries logo on my forehead with his $10,000 cigar. And that is all true. But for real though, there's only so many run-on rambles and cheap filler poetics I can barely pronounce to get the same point across, and that point is MCU Spider-Man has not worked for me. He has not felt like Spider-Man to me, even if I always desperately wanted him to. So instead of criticizing and continuing to cast myself in this hellish caricature I've created, I wanted to try something different. I wanted to talk about what I want from MCU Spider-Man 4, similar to the vids I made on If I Wrote the Batman 2, if I wrote my own Spider-Man series. I want to take the character and ideas John Watts established and try to find a way to craft a story, a fourth film that would get me on board, that would finally, possibly, fix me, that would finally allow me to put down the keyboard, touch grass, and say that MCU Spider-Man 4 is a good Spider-Man movie. Oh fuck, here we go. But before I crucify myself once more in the tangled web of white bread, I'd like to talk to you about the sponsor of today's self-pleasure, Opera GX. Most browsers, they are boring, stale. You know this, like the current state of blockbuster cinema. They get the job done without much room for any kind of expression, individuality. Opera GX has always strived to be different, and with their newest update, Facelift Evolution, the browser is more customizable than ever before. Bam! You can control pretty much anything you like, optimizing it not just for your computer, but more importantly, your taste, man. Opera GX has deep personalization, bold design, and a cinematic multiverse of mods and modding options that allow you to control even the smallest of pixels. You want that retro feel, want each key click to hit you with a wave of nostalgia? GX Boy is for you. How about some horror? Whammo bammo. Cyberpunk stan, look at this, and of course if you're a cape shit fanatic like me, check out Across the Operaverse or make your browser the freaking bat computer. Social media integration, splash screens, custom UI fonts, background music, custom key sounds. Here's a whole list of features that I can't even fit on the screen. Sounds cool, right? But I get it. I got you, man. Change is scary. You've been using the big G-man all your life and you're scared to sign the divorce papers, but Opera makes it easy with their import tool that allows you to quickly import all your settings from your previous browser into GX. It's even compatible with every single Chrome extension. Here's me transferring everything from Safari to here. Look how long that took. About as fast as you can say fuck. Give Opera GX a try by clicking my link in the description. It's the browser for the ones who are sick of the bland, the boring, the banal browsing. It's the best browser for the gamers, for the ones who want to stand the hell out. Thanks, guys. Hey again. I want to talk story points, themes, vibes, all that, but this won't be like a full-on fan fiction, more so a mood board of ideas. I'm no Troy Oboyo. He's a gem and I'm a rusty old rock, even though I'm sure we've dreamt of similar things. Let's get this out of the way. I pray that Spider-Man 4 ditches the multiverse. Look, I also want to see Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man again, and I killed my third-born son named Tim to see Sam Raimi get to direct his Spider-Man 4, but I think even with the box office potential that would be hard for Sony to ignore, it's time for Tom Holland's Peter to be alone. I mean, this shot right here kind of alone. No undos and no underoos. Hell, I don't even want my favorite MCU character, Matty Boy Murdock, to play any kind of supporting role. I want one singular Spider-Man. Someone who does not need any other supporting superhero, any other Peter Parker to guide nor to give him a lesson. It's past time that Sony trusted that this Peter Parker by himself can and will always sell tickets if there's a good story for him to swing through. I actually think in the grand scheme of things, the damage caused by opening the door to the endless possibility of the multiverse will far outweigh the original bliss, simply because it's hard for me, for anyone really, to be like,
I want the villain to be MCU Goblin.
Because we've seen a very powerful battle between Tom's Peter and Sam Raimi's Norman. How can you top that without going in the complete opposite direction? How can the shock, the terror, and the thrill of seeing Green Goblin dismantle Peter Parker's life ever hit as powerful if this Peter already knows that there are plenty of twisted and broken Osborns out there that will always develop a hatred of Spider-Man? How can, even if it's a vastly unique and fresh take, ever top the cruelty of killing his mother figure just to teach him a twisted lesson? What does it say about their faith in the character thus far if his greatest traumas and tragedies have belonged and have been brought on by other renditions' enemies? And how can we move past that? How can they evolve the story? It's an interesting question, right? And there's nothing inherently wrong with making Tom's Peter face the same old classic villains once more. There is a reason they are iconic and can be reinvented again and again. But you would need an exceptionally good writer with a vastly different idea to make those introductions, confrontations feel fresh and new. It's an almost impossible task, you know, because we are dealing with a main character who has already faced and lost everything because of multiverse variants. Which is why I think we need to shut that door before we end up with Flash 2.0, sick, before everything literally becomes the wasteland, the void, before it's no longer fun for the casual audience member to ooh and ah in nostalgic remembrance of the childhood joy we once all held with such reverence. Basically, to shut myself the fuck up and move on. I'm saying on a pure conceptual level, I would not give in to the fan choice. Do not do the easy guaranteed billion-dollar buddy cop movie between the Spider-Men. Apparently, and this is all hearsay, so who fucking knows, there's an internal battle about this very thing, probably still happening now as we speak. Rumors circulating about the battle between a grounded street-level Spider-Man story and another zany multiverse cameo fest. Which way should they go?
No, I haven't found out anything. Don't call back.
I think the answer is easy. I think the filmmakers need to take the risky route and do the opposite of a multiverse story. I think they need to dial it back in physical scale, but tell a story that feels just as satisfying, just as grand. Plot heft does not equal emotional weight. The philosophical battle between the boats at the end of The Dark Knight will always feel just as, if not more powerful than the end of the universe stakes we have become accustomed to. My favorite MCU movie moment, the one that gives me the goosebumps every single time I watch, is this. And that's not because the physical stakes are high, not because any silly space rock, but because of the simple, beautiful act of holding your newfound family's hand, bearing the burden of each other's trauma. Spider-Man is the perfect character to have these moments. He is the working class hero. His greatest losses and most intense battles always come down to the struggle between his happiness and his compassion for his fellow man. He is, or at least should be, the most connected to the people, and it's about past time we continue what Homecoming began to establish. Despite what some of you may say and what I might have said in the past,
Spider-Man Homecoming is not a good Spider-Man movie.
I loved a lot of the meal Homecoming began to cook. The best part of that movie was this familiarity, a pseudo-respect they began to develop between Peter and his enemies. Peter Parker, by all means, should always relate more to the Prowler who's got a young nephew in Queens, or even the Shocker, the Vulture, and the common street thugs left to deal with the insanity and mess of these militarized gods. Vulture started out so fresh and unique because for the first time kinda ever in a Spider-Man movie, he was not a scientist who wanted to change the world. He was not a man who lost everything because he believed in his work. He was not a sympathetic down on his luck character who got smacked with the mutating hand of fate. He was a working class family man who hid his turn into selfish power seeking behind the veil of sticking it to the man, to the careless, rich, and powerful. What he says to Peter is correct.
How do you think your buddy Stark paid for that tower?
Those people, Pete, those people up there, the rich and the powerful, they do whatever they want. Guys like us, you and me, we build their roads and we fight all their wars and everything. They don't care about us. That's how it is. I know you know what I'm talking about, Peter.
Even if the reason he's saying it is entirely misguided. And now, after the Doctor Strange reset, the collateral damage softcore reboot, we are left with the Spider-Man who can no longer get a $2 million tech upgrade from Stark, Fury, or Happy Hogan. We are left with that same young man trying to do the right thing in his own way. It's the perfect starting point, right? You can go anywhere from here and you are left with a Peter in a state of mind that is perfect. I've lived this life I cannot tell anyone about. I fought gods, been to alien planets, and nobody will believe I was even there. And that's if I wanted to tell them, because I can never tell them. I can never tell anyone that I have these abilities because I've seen what happens when they know. I've seen what happens to those I love when they are a part of this gift, this curse. I want to see that explored. I want a Peter who is now at the polar opposite emotional point from where we started. I want a Spider-Man who cannot allow himself to ask for help, who is unable to confide in anyone out of fear. fear, who has forced himself to become the most self-sufficient Spidey, but the most isolated Peter Parker he's ever been. You almost have this added weight behind the whole nobody can know my identity because they will die thing, because everyone once knew his identity, and because of that, his whole world fell apart and people died. I cannot love, I cannot have friendship, I can only try to allow others, save others so that they can experience the things I cannot. How do you capitalize off that inherently great character struggle? How do you actually continue the self-made, stitched together in a rundown apartment Spider-Man that we left off on? What's the story? There are so many ways you could take this, right? You could completely ignore the supporting characters from before, which largely I think you should do. I love Zendaya as much as the next. Genuinely, I think if she were allowed to play her MJ with half the depth she's played other characters, we get the greatest MJ ever. But also, I think, for now, we need to start anew as much as possible. And yeah, that means no Ned. No disrespect, but I've always hated the Genki for Peter, and the culmination of his character felt like a standard CW tech guy thrown into absurd situations for the sake of a laugh. Let him lie. Kill him, sorry. Or bring him back as Hobgoblin in 5 movies. Point is, Peter's choice to not connect with them at the end of No Way Home, that should not be undone yet. That should be the low point of the arc in this movie, or the next. Hell, maybe the ending is him selfishly yet understandably trying to connect with the girl he once loved. That's interesting. That has weight, but it needs to be earned. And the way to earn that, in my know-nothing opinion, is to have Peter experience the world of college through his entirely isolated lens. I think Peter is throwing himself so far into Spider-Man that he does not form connections, companionships. The film should throw those possible relationships at Peter, an unrelenting wave of what if. He's thrown into a living situation with a new roommate after he moves onto his college campus because he could not afford solo rent, could not afford it because nobody would hire a kid with no resume, no references, nothing but a GED. Especially in our modern day New York, Peter would be fucked. That roommate being a tormented young man who wears long sleeves to hide the bruises, the scars Peter catches a glimpse of. He refuses that connection, compassion as Peter Parker, not just because he's trying to not make the same mistakes, but because that kid shares the family name of the man who killed his aunt. He meets a girl, someone smart, someone filled with spunk, but he's a massive, cold-hearted dick to her because not only will he not allow anyone to get too close, but because her name is Gwen. Is it better to have tried to love, knowing in some universe you'll brutally lose that love, than to have not tried at all? Peter is very much in the it's better to have not phase. And what's wonderful about all this, in my opinion, what would be wonderful rather if pulled off correctly, is you have a character that is actively avoiding the canon, the expectation, because he's aware of it. He knows that he probably would care, create connections with these new cast members, yet he knows where that love gets him. But what happens when Spider-Man is forced into a situation with them, not Peter, Spider-Man? What happens when Mayor Wilson Fisk tasks the cops, one of those cops might just be Captain Stacy, and all the low-level villains with unmasking and bringing in the vigilante Spider-Man? Now, I know, I said I don't want to see Matt, I don't want to have this story be so MCU dependent, but I'm not a complete fucking moron.
You're a fucking moron.
I know somehow it will need to tie into the grand universe, and this is how you do it. You take Fisk, one of, if not the best villain in the entire Marvel universe, and you put his focus on Spider-Man. And don't get me wrong, he's not the main villain. He's essentially the big man. He's there hiding behind his political agendas, hiding in the shadows of misguided public support, trying to make a statement, a power flex. Vigilantes are not allowed. Vigilantes will always take my Vanessa. They will always make me feel the same powerlessness I felt in front of my father, and now I will unmask and take them all down. But why is Fisk so hell-bent on bringing down this young man in particular? Well, simply put, someone as powerful as Spider-Man, who doesn't just save the world from alien invaders, but whom sticks up for the poor and the forgotten, rids Fisk of his greatest weapon, our desperation. If vigilantes like Matt and Peter are protecting those the system has abandoned, Fisk's appeal, his grip, his false promises start to ring less and less true. After his on and off again beef with the true Marvel Jesus, Spider-Man is targeted target number 2. Spider-Man needs to be unmasked and dealt with. And I know what you're thinking. We've already seen what happens when Peter's identity is revealed, and that's the point. Peter has seen that too. The threat is not repeating the past. The conflict is avoiding the consequences of such a reveal. And that simple premise, a bounty on Spider-Man's head, which yes, we've seen before slightly, and that resulted in one of my favorite Spider-Man moments.
Freeze! Down on the ground! Your hands behind your head. Now!
But imagine if the entire movie played out kind of like a John Wick 3, except with the college-age Peter Parker. Everyone who wants a buck, from the dirty cops to his old enemies, even his fucking classmates, want to find an unmasked Spider-Man, bring him in, force Peter to relive the inciting incident of his greatest tragedy. There's a sense of paranoia. We've seen how far the tentacles, the tendrils, the webbing of Wilson Fisk can reach. We've seen a brilliant story play out with him spinning his blackmail, his corruption, his evil all across all aspects of New York. And yet, putting a freshly isolated Peter Parker in the middle of that feels like the perfect way to go to me. Can I trust this young cat burglar whose father was killed by Fisk, who wants my help in seeking revenge? She wants Fisk dead the same way I wanted to kill Norman. Can I teach her what the other Peter taught me? Am I ready to do that? Or is her story bullshit? Is it a con, playing to Spider-Man's empathy while trying to get her biggest score? The only extended time outside the mask that we are privy to is Peter keeping May's legacy alive by working at Feast, continuing her acts of compassion and kindness. Feast is now being run by Martin Lee. Most fans know exactly who Martin Lee is or who he will become. We can use that to our advantage. Of course he's going to let out his inner demon, but when? Could this kid Harry, who I'm forced to dorm with, forced to have the heightened scent of booze and weed waft into my nostrils every night when he comes home hammered, could he actually be out to get me? I mean, he seems to want to connect, want someone to confide in, and I, Peter Parker, desperately need connection, but can I allow it? Can I trust it? Could the small corner shop that's being robbed in Queens just be a setup to catch Spider-Man, to catch me? Are the cries I'm hearing in the night those in need? Are they a part of Fisk's twisted game? Peter, this Peter, especially at this point, his experience is defined by the mask. He's freed himself of Peter Parker, and all that remains are those large white eyes surrounded by red. What happens when you dismantle the only thing Peter is able to hold on to? What if Spider-Man is pushed to distrust the only purpose he believes he has? It's a paranoid thriller, a ticking time bomb tone that we haven't seen in a Spider-Man film before. I want to keep the chaos of this section from Amazing Spider-Man, the first 20 minutes of No Way Home, and extend that across an entire fucking feature. I'd love to see that story play out. I'd love to see it well executed from a filmmaker who understands humanity behind surface level archetypes, who understands the nuance of our very often nonsensical behavior, which the director Destin Daniel Cretton clearly does. Which brings me to my next point. Let him cook. I don't know if you know this, but Destin Daniel Cretton was originally going to direct one of the next 17 Avengers movies, and I hated that idea. Why do I hate that idea? Because to me, the worst part of Shang-Chi was the standard Marvel stuff. The moment where an interesting villain who showed promise and menace played by a brilliant actor needs to go full evil mode against a gray backdrop wasteland so the VFX artist can only work 70-hour weeks instead of 100. The moment where the directorial style has to take a back burner to support the predictable pipeline that it takes to finish these movies. The moments where the sincerity must be undermined by relevant meta commentary.
Beef.
Porn.
Yada yada yada. Shang-Chi was shot by Bill Pope, Bill motherfucking Pope, the same guy who photographed. And it felt like he and Destin, despite some fresh staging and interesting ideas, were held back by the scale and process of making a Marvel film. The worst things about Shang-Chi were the moments that felt like the mandatories, the moments that forced the superhero scale, the Phase 4 Marvel tone that everyone from the snobbish fuckheads like me to the casual viewer started to get sick of. So for me, it feels like an Avengers movie would only force him to juggle even more mandatories, even more requirements, and lose even more of the moments of Shang-Chi that actually felt like a director's voice, a perspective on the genre. So basically, I'm glad he left. I'm glad he's free from the weight of the Avengers. I'm glad they're actually moving the Avengers series in an But yet, I think Destin might just be the perfect choice to take Tom Holland's Spider-Man in a new direction, in this theoretical direction. I think he could kill it. And can you imagine if he brought back Bill Pope to shoot a Spider-Man movie again? They might actually start looking like actual films again. Sorry. I want Destin and whoever he chooses to shoot his Spider-Man movie, his Spidey action, to showcase the martial arts, the John Woo Crouching Tiger tinged action of Shang-Chi and take that even further. Multiply it by 40,000 years of human evolution. Let's take the stylized blocking and add that element of uncertainty. I've said this before in my own pitch video for a live-action Spider-Man series, but Peter, when facing his enemies, should move like an acrobatic ninja. Enough with the tech, the gadgets, and the upgrades. I'd rather have my corneas burned by chemical waste than ever see a pair of iron spider legs again. Instead, let's figure out a new way to show Peter swinging. Let's figure out an exciting way to show him blocking, dodging, punching. Spider-Man has been shown in so many different action poses, whether he's Donner-like in his sincere power or grungy, dirty, yet slapstick in his movement. I want to see Destin's take on it. I want to see what kind of movement Tom Holland's Peter has outside the confines of visual effects artistry, because damn, this dude can fucking move. Imagine that kind of stuff done in costume, not a mocap suit, but in the hand-sewn outfit that should be practical. I will never ever understand the choice made in No Way Home to follow up this genuinely great shot that says so much about where the franchise is headed with a half-finished render. It's insanity that visually and kind of philosophically undermines the very point of the ending. We are done with that. We're done with that. And I believe Destin Daniel Cretton would agree. The costume should wrinkle, it should look messy at points, and it should be tangible. I never ever want to see anyone compare Spider-Man's costume and movement to a PS2 cutscene again. I'd rather him look like a statue in certain moments. I'd rather him look like the human basketball in others. Anything but a cartoon, not just because I hate the fact that Spider-Man's visual power has been relegated to that of a small CGI chipmunk, but because it's a disservice to not only the VFX artists crunched to polish something that should not need polishing, not only to the costume designers whose work is diminished and covered up, but to the character himself. Of course, you will have him face the likes of a CG-enhanced Scorpion. You can have him face outlandish threats as he always has, but I want to see a Spider-Man himself move in a way that feels spectacularly raw. I want to see characters that feel ultimately vulnerable. If the Home trilogy was aimed at those who were sophomores in high school, much like Harry Potter, it's time the franchise grew with the audience. Spider-Man 4 should be the Prisoner of Azkaban. Shit should get real. And I know Destin as a filmmaker could pull that off with flying colors. This is a man whose passion project, which started as a short film that got morphed into a feature, is about troubled, hurting teenagers. It's based on his real life experience working with and in a facility for broken, underprivileged kids.
What the fuck is that supposed to mean?
Who are struggling to connect, to function. This man can not only shoot action, but his focus in his own work has always been on the vulnerable struggles of young people, which, you know, just is fucking Spider-Man. I frankly am so sick to death of nice guy Peter Parker in a nice world filled with nice people who never really struggle with anything that's not nice. And I'm not talking about grand death or universe-altering snaps. I'm talking about toxic relationships, parental absence or abuse, drugs, bad choices, mental health problems. I'm sick of dumbing down the emotional stress, the heft of being 17, of being 20. The fact they cut the idea that MJ had absentee parents who did not care enough to pick her up after shit goes down in DC from Homecoming is a cardinal sin that should never have been committed and should be the opposite mentality going forward. And no, man, I don't need people doing bumps in the bathroom of ESU, although that would be some real shit. I need characters whose biggest worry isn't getting good grades, it's dealing with their manic depressive father who just lost his wife. It's dealing with the reality of poverty, facing the reality that you are now an orphan and have nobody to confide in. The obvious and fair criticism of all my Spidey takes is that I just want the character to be a depressing, angsty sob story. And that's not the case at all. I just believe that authenticity is not one tone. We as people are not definable as solely happy or solely sad. Light and levity has to come from within stress and discomfort. Homecoming and No Way Home both had those moments of authentic sincerity. Something as simple as dancing with the woman who has cared for you your whole life. Something as grand and tragic as having to fight against impossible odds, lift the heft of your crumbling world off your shoulders. Both are needed, and the balance of that is critical to any Spider-Man story. We left off in a place where Peter's life is teetering towards the dark, and it would be disingenuous to undo that for the sake of making the audience feel comfortable and safe. This is the first time, and maybe the only time, we will ever get a live-action Peter Parker whose story can evolve, change, change, go through a plethora of different tones. This is the only time we might ever get to see the same actor play Peter at 16 and at 26. The only time we might ever get to see a showcase of and for different filmmakers, writers, storytellers, their individual styles, and their collective life experiences defining, shaping perhaps the greatest fictional character of all time. Wait, I forgot the single thing that every single one of you expected me to bring up, the name that Tom Holland's Peter is seemingly unable to speak.
Gotta impress Mr. Stark, so...
Would HiTop, definitely a bottom, films find a way to say that name, to bring that character into the story? Fuck yeah, I would. And I think the perfect place to do this is at the low point of my theoretical bound to never happen, end of Act 2 going into Act 3, which is always the most interesting point in a superhero movie, right? You know good will win, you know hope will persevere, yada yada yada, but the interesting part is how, when at their lowest point, how will they find the strength to push forward, to believe again? Peter here is starting to question his faith, not just in the corrupt, but in the everyman. Are we really worth saving when we'd selfishly, cruelly give into our worst selves again and again for money, for a chance at relevance? You got a city full of people seemingly ready to shoot down Spider-Man for a corrupt psycho politician. Why save the people who you've already given up everything for when they would and will always so easily turn their backs on you? This is what Pete is feeling after having his ass handed to him by one of the superpowered bounty hunters, Hammerhead, Scorpion, any big bad who beat his ass into the mud as always. And as always, Spider-Man barely managed to escape. We see him stumble into a dark alley. It's night. The pavement is reflecting the orange hellish hues of Manhattan after dark. He collapses to the ground, his vision out of focus. We slowly fade back as we reach the sweet relief of unconscious rest. Laughter is heard, warm, friendly, the kind we wish we could dream of. It's distorted to a degree. Come on, kiddo. It's time to get up. Blinding light, we snap back awake, we look around, we are wrapped in a blanket, we touch our face, our mask is still on. In front of us, a fire pit, we focus in. Across from us, a man, clearly struggling, homeless. He smiles a toothless smile that is warmer than the fire. You okay, son? And we don't know if we can trust him, right? Could he just be another desperate man trying to reap the rewards of Fisk's bounty? If I wanted money, you'd be waking up to that fat man's ugly mug and not mine. We warm up a little. Why do you think I wear this stupid thing? Got plenty of ugly underneath too. A moment of the fire crackling, we take a beat to settle in, to relax a little, gain our strength. You got a name? We ask. Do you? The man laughs. You know, I was just asking myself the same thing. We laugh back. Thanks for scooping my ass out of that alley. Wanted to give you a fighting chance. Got half this hellhole trying to get you. Only half? That's a relief. The man chuckles. You hungry? Peter is starving but doesn't want to take anything from someone who has nothing. The man hands him a thermos before he can turn down his offer. Chicken noodle, homemade. My ma used to make this for me all the time, not that canned junk, not in this house, she'd say. Peter chuckles. Thanks. He turns to his side, lifting up his mask away from the man. He's still very paranoid, very cautious, but he sips. No need to hide, boy. We met before, you know. Peter finishes sipping, rolls his mask back down, and turns towards the man, handing him his soup back. We did? Are you sure, man? I think I'd remember that jolly face you got there. You didn't see me. Can't say I'm surprised. I'm quiet like that. Gotta be down here when most of y'all are too busy flying around up there. I guess you're right about that. But hey, it's nice down here, you know? Could get used to it. No, it's not. The man laughs. No, it's not. Peter empathetically responds. What was I doing when you saw me, I mean? Hopefully nothing too mortifying. Well, you weren't wearing that tight shit you got on now. You were in those bright-ass, baggy-ass pajamas. Looked warm, at least. Yeah, they were warm. If I still had them, I'd give them to you. And you weren't wearing that mask either. Peter suddenly stops joking. Could Strange's spell not have fully worked? How did it work? Was it about the name, seeing the full face, seeing both together? But that's only his first thought because he knows where this story is going. My eyes ain't so good anymore. You ain't got nothing to worry about, kid. I could pass you on the street just like you'd pass me, and neither one of us would know it was the other. But that night, I could see, I could hear how young you were. I was surprised because most of you ain't young. Yeah, Most of us aren't, I guess, huh? Peter somberly, anxiously tries to switch the topic. But listen, mister, I think you have the wrong guy. I saw you crying. I was surprised because most of you seem like you don't cry. Strong men, weight of the world, all that nonsense. A gulp from the man, a breath. He was bleeding. So much blood. I've seen that kind of blood before, too many times on too many different faces. It's something nobody your age should ever see. I could see you holding his hand. Peter lowers his head, clearly feeling too much through the mask, gripping it so tightly, trying to will it back to life. Your old man's hand. Peter looks back up. You kept saying how sorry you were over and over. He was gone by then. He'd moved on by then, but you kept apologizing, hoping he could hear you somehow softer than louder. Maybe he'd hear you. The man is emotional at this point as well. Then the pig showed up and you had to let go. You had to let go of his hand. You had to swing away. I've seen Spider-Man up there a lot, even seen him help the people down here. But I can still hear your voice calling out to him. And son, I ain't trying to blackmail you and I ain't trying to make you relive that night. God knows no one should have to, no boy should have to. I guess I just needed to confess. A pause of tension. Is he the one who... I didn't see who shot him. I didn't see the why. I'm so sorry I can't tell you the why, but He reaches into his garbage bag of supplies. I was hungry. I was cold. I was... He extends his hand towards Peter, opens his grasp, revealing a wrinkled and tattered brown leather wallet. I took it, ran right up to the body, reached right into his jacket and took it. Not a thought in my mind back then, just some kind of instinct, need, and Peter looks back up at the man, cutting him off, staring through the mask and into his soul, the man doing the same, an unspoken, silent moment of connection. Peter takes the wallet, his masked hand trembling. We become Peter's eyes as we slowly open it and glance through it. The money is still in there. Couldn't bring myself to spend it all these years later, and I just keep hearing that kid's voice, his scream. Our eyes move down, tucked into the side pocket, an old Polaroid photograph. We slowly pull it out. A young Peter Parker, 12 or so, smiling, the innocence of childhood, the warmth of feeling loved by your mother. On his right, May, making a silly face. And to Peter's left, his uncle, who has kindness radiating from his face. His presence can be felt still, somehow piercing through the layers of aged film and the damage of time. We know his name, yet it never has to be spoken. Peter stands up firmly. We're not sure what he's feeling. We just know that he's feeling a lot. He approaches the man crossing the fire pit. The man grows a little timid. Not sure if he's said too much. Not sure if... Peter embraces the man, hugging him as the crackling fire gives everything an earthly, dreamlike feel. This is all I need and what I believe Peter needs at this moment in time. To me, we'd never need to speak of Ben or his possible killer again. To me, this isn't just an empty callback. It's to teach Peter a lesson, one his uncle most likely instilled in him again and again. People are broken, self-serving, yet in all of us there is regret, there is care, and there will always be good. Thank you. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video. This one was edited by That One Doesn't Count, who had his fucking work cut out for him. Thank you guys. I'm trying to upload more, so let me know what you thought of these ideas. And if you think I'm a hack, you know, that's fair. I am. All right, bye. Love you.